In 2002, a decorated Army intelligence officer and his 13-year-old grandson vanished off a Texas highway. No crash, no bodies, no trace, only a broken camcorder and a flash drive the government denied existed. What happened on that road trip? What did the veteran know? And why, 20 years later, are people still dying to keep it buried? This is Classified. Subscribe to uncover the evidence. West Texas, 2002. The wind blew dry across the broken pavement as the sky dimmed into a deep desert twilight. A red Ford Bronco sat abandoned off the shoulder of Highway 90. Driver's side door wide open, its engine long cold. There was no blood, no struggle, no footprints leading away in any direction. Only the soft, static crackle of a handheld camcorder left sitting on the passenger seat, still recording. Sheriff Wyatt Cobb was the first to arrive on the scene. He'd answered dozens of missing persons calls before: runaways, drunk hunters, tourists who took bad directions from gas station clerks. But this felt different. This felt wrong. He was halfway through his second cigarette when the deputy flagged him over to the front seat. "Sir," the deputy said, handing him the camera, "you're going to want to see this." Wyatt squinted at the flickering screen. It showed the interior of the Bronco. Grandfather and grandson laughing, eating trail mix, the radio playing a Rolling Stones track in the background. But then something changed. The camera jittered. The laughter cut out. A man's voice, urgent, breathless. "No, Jaime. Listen to me. This is not just a map. It's the kill list. They'll come for this." The recording skipped. "You don't tell anyone, not your mom, not the police, no one. If anything happens to me." Then static, followed by a frame of a highway sign. "Welcome to Marfa." Then nothing. Later that night, Cobb filed the official report and sealed the evidence. The camera was logged and buried under forms. The missing veteran, Colonel David Holden, and his grandson Jaime were declared presumed dead after 3 months. No foul play. Case closed. But Cobb kept a copy of the tape. He didn't know why. Until 2 decades later, when someone started killing the people who had seen it. Present day. Austin, Texas. The buzz of cheap LED lights filled the small studio like white noise. Aria Kent adjusted the gain knob on her mic, eyes flicking to the waveform on her laptop. Outside, a slow Texas thunderstorm rolled in, casting long shadows over the city skyline. Rain was coming, the kind that lingered. Across from her sat a man who had remained silent longer than most would dare. Wyatt Cobb, 72. Former sheriff of Presidio County. His shoulders were still broad beneath the creased denim jacket, but time had softened him. His mustache framed a mouth that looked like it had held in too much for far too long. He hadn't said a word since stepping into her recording closet, barely more than a padded storage room in her South Austin apartment. But Aria didn't push. Some confessions took time to come loose. She had learned that early on in her career, when victims' families would pause, stare into the middle distance, and only then begin unraveling. "This isn't live," she offered gently. "If you want to stop at any point, we stop." Wyatt didn't nod, didn't shake his head. His eyes lingered on the recorder, as if waiting for it to blink first. A storm cracked somewhere in the distance. The lights flickered once. Aria leaned forward and pressed the record button. The red dot glowed quietly. "This is Aria Kent," she said into the mic, her voice low, deliberate. "You're listening to Subsurface. This season, we begin a new investigation, one the government closed before it even started. It's the story of a man and a boy who vanished on a road trip in the summer of 2002. She paused for effect, the way she'd trained herself to. The man was Colonel David Holden, a decorated Army intelligence officer. The boy was his 13-year-old grandson, Jaime. They were never seen again. Across from her, Wyatt shifted. "Not much, but enough." They said it was the desert, Arya continued. Heat, confusion, an accident maybe. But the bodies were never found, and for Sheriff Wyatt Cobb, the man who filed the report, there were details he could never explain. The silence stretched between them. Finally he spoke. They told me not to talk, he said. His voice was hoarse but firm. Back then, right after it happened, suit shows up, says it's above my clearance, asked if I wanted to keep my pension. Arya blinked. Who sent the suit? He gave her a look. You think they ever give names? Another beat passed. I kept one thing, he added. Just one. Don't ask why. Maybe because I knew even then something was off. He reached into the canvas satchel resting at his feet. From inside, wrapped in a handkerchief, he pulled out a small black mini DV cassette. Its label, written in fading marker, read, Holden, Marfa. Last tape. Arya's breath caught in her throat. You had footage? He nodded slowly. Didn't turn it in. They took the Bronco, the sat phone, his files. But they missed this. Or maybe they let me keep it. Like they wanted someone to remember. Thunder rumbled again, this time closer. The studio lights dimmed briefly. Arya reached out and took the tape with reverence, like it might shatter if held too tightly. That night, long after Wyatt had gone and the storm had broken into a steady downpour outside, Arya sat in the dark with her laptop and a digitizer. She connected the adapter, loaded the tape, and held her breath as the footage began to play. At first, it was home video. Colonel Holden driving, a map spread across his lap, radio humming with classic rock. Jaime sat beside him in the front seat, laughing through a mouthful of trail mix. Don't choke, kid, Holden joked. I'm not pulling over until New Mexico. Jaime grinned at the camera, then leaned forward to poke it. Mom's gonna freak if she finds out you let me sit up here. She's not gonna find out. More laughter. Arya felt the warmth of the moment, even through the grainy lens of 2002 tape stock. She leaned closer to the screen. The video cut suddenly. Static, then shaking. The audio jumped. Now the camera was pointed at Holden's face, serious, sweat dripping down his temple. He was whispering, No, Jaime, listen to me. This is not just a map. It's the kill list. They'll come for this if they find it. You hear me? Static again. Then a flash of a road sign. Welcome to Marfa. Then nothing. Arya sat back, heart pounding. The storm outside was in full swing now, rain tapping rapidly against the windows. She paused the footage on the road sign and stared at it like it might offer answers. A kill list? She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, over lukewarm coffee and a cluttered digital archive, Arya combed through every old newspaper she could find from West Texas in 2002. The same summary appeared again and again. Missing, presumed dead. No signs of foul play. Jaime Holden, 13 years old. Last seen with his grandfather. Each article echoed the same narrative. No crash, no remains, no questions asked. But one name at the bottom of an archived obituary caught her eye. Survived by childhood friend, Benjamin Kwan. She dug deeper. Benji Kwan. Software engineer, born 1989. Still in Texas. By early afternoon, she was standing outside a townhouse in Pflugerville, a few miles north of Austin. The sun had burned away the storm clouds, leaving the streets damp and glinting. Arya knocked twice. A man in his mid-30s opened the door. Sleep-deprived eyes, messy black hair, bare feet on the tile. He didn't look surprised to see her. You're that podcaster, right? She nodded. Arya Kent. I'm working on a piece about Jaime. He hesitated. Then opened the door wider. I figured someone would come eventually. Inside, the living room was sparsely decorated. Bookshelves, clean surfaces, nothing overly personal. He didn't offer her a seat, just moved to a cabinet and pulled out a hardcover novel. It had been hollowed out, Inside, nestled in foam, was a flash drive. "He sent me this," Benji said. "Mailed it the day before he vanished. No return address, just a note. If anything happens to me, find someone who'll tell the story." Arya took the drive carefully. "What's on it?" "Encrypted files," he said. "Military-grade stuff. I'm no hacker, but I know firewalls. And mine went crazy the moment I tried to open it." "You think you're being watched?" Benji nodded toward the window. "Black truck parks out front once a week. Always the same one. Tinted windows. Never moves until I go outside." That night, back in her apartment, Arya connected the flash drive to her air-gapped laptop. The screen flickered once. The folder inside was labeled simply OP Sightglass. Corrupted files, empty images, strings of code with acronyms she didn't recognize. She scrolled through until one image finally opened. A black military seal with no clear insignia. No eagle, no stars. Just a circle, a triangle, and a Latin word etched beneath. OBLIVISCOR. She typed it into a translator. To forget. Behind her, thunder cracked again. Or maybe it was something else. She turned toward the window and peeked through the blinds. Across the street, a black SUV sat idling in the dark. She didn't see the driver. Just two front seats and the dull red glow of brake lights. Arya stepped back from the window. They knew she had the tape, and now they knew she had the drive. The flash drive pulsed faintly in the dark, its tiny LED light blinking like a heartbeat. Arya sat frozen, the glow from her screen washing over her face as code scrolled past, lines she couldn't read, punctuated with fragments of file names and redacted metadata. The words OP Sightglass hovered at the top of the file tree like a threat carved into stone. She didn't open anything else, not yet. Her instincts, honed from 4 seasons of digging into the fractures of other people's stories, told her this wasn't just data, it was bait. She shut the lid of her laptop and backed away. The apartment was still. Too still. Her ears strained for sound beyond the windows, but the rain had stopped. All that remained was the hush of wet pavement and the ticking of her wall clock. Midnight. A glance through the blinds confirmed the black SUV was still there, parked across the street. No movement inside, just idling, like it had all the time in the world. The next morning, Arya left her apartment with a flash drive stashed inside a fake book, one she often used to hide spare cash and backup drives. She'd read too many stories where people went missing and left their notes in plain sight. Not her. She backed up the footage from the Holden tape and slipped a second copy into her safety deposit box before sunrise. Benji met her again at the cafe downtown, the one with mismatched chairs and thick, bitter coffee. He looked worse than before, pale, fidgeting, shadows under his eyes like bruises. "You opened it?" he asked, skipping greetings. "Some of it," Arya said. "Mostly corrupted. But I saw a seal. Military, but not normal." The word obliviscore Benji stirred his coffee without drinking it. They've used that word before. Latin's common in black projects. Makes it harder for civilians to trace. Obliviscore shows up in some of the DARPA memos I've seen, usually tied to neural manipulation. Memory erosion. "You think they wiped Jaime?" she asked. He looked up slowly. "I think they tried." Arya leaned in. "Tell me about Jaime. Not the files. The person." Benji sat back and rubbed his palms on his jeans. "He was weird," he said finally. "Not in a bad way. Just always thinking 5 layers deeper than the rest of us. Obsessed with ciphers and Cold War history. He was the only 13-year-old I knew who carried a tactical pen and could explain the Bay of Pigs in detail." She smiled faintly. "Sounds like his grandfather rubbed off on him." "Yeah," Benji said. "Colonel Holden raised him more than his mom did, honestly. Jaime didn't talk about his dad much. There was this distance, even when we were kids, like he'd already been hurt once and decided not to risk it again." He paused. I didn't understand it back then, but looking back, I think Holden was training him. Arya frowned. Training him for what? I don't know, but that drive, the encryption, he didn't learn that in school. And the note he left me, it wasn't just a warning. It was an instruction. He reached into his coat pocket and unfolded the piece of paper Arya hadn't seen yet. It was worn, creased a dozen times over, like a relic. Ben, if this gets to you, they found us. I don't know if I'll be able to finish what he started, but maybe you can help someone else get the truth out. Don't try to decrypt it yourself. Look for the symbol. Follow the chain. They'll erase us. But maybe they won't erase everyone. Arya stared at the letter until the words blurred. There's a chain, she asked. What does that mean? Benji hesitated, then reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small folded map. Not a printed road map. This was handmade. A chain of red dots traced across the southwest. El Paso, Marfa, Albuquerque, Taos, Flagstaff, all military-adjacent towns, all marked with tiny codes. I think he and his grandfather were following these stops, Benji said. Or leaving them. Arya tapped the first dot. Marfa, she said. That's where the tape ends. Exactly. Do you think Jaime's still alive? Benji's eyes shifted toward the window. Outside, a black car drove by. Different make, same tinted windows. I did, he whispered. For a long time, but lately, I don't know. Arya leaned back and breathed in deeply. The smell of coffee had gone sour in the cup between them. You said you tried to decrypt it. Did anything actually open? Benji nodded reluctantly. Only one thing. A document title. It flickered once and disappeared. What was it? He looked her in the eye. Operation Sightglass. The name hung in the air like smoke. That night, Arya searched every military database she could access. Public archives, leaked directories, whistleblower forums. There was no Operation Sightglass. Not in the known records. Not even in the conspiracy theory message boards that cataloged phantom black ops, but in a declassified NSA glossary, buried 3 pages deep in a PDF dated 1996, she found a reference. Sightglass, redacted, domestic filtration program, surveillance, yes, behavioral assessment, data structuring via subconscious pattern inputs. Status, experimental inactive. Security level, Majestic 6, no details, no authors, just a file number and a classified stamp. Use controlled access only. She stared at the words behavioral assessment and subconscious pattern inputs until her mind spun. This wasn't just about encryption. This was about programming. Before bed, she pulled the blinds tight and placed a chair under the doorknob. Not because she thought it would help, but because it felt like something people did in movies when the walls began to close in. Sleep came in fragments. In one dream, she was standing in the middle of a desert highway, the sun boiling her skin. In the distance, a boy ran toward her, barefoot and panicked. His mouth moved, but she heard nothing. Behind him, a black SUV crested the hill. She woke gasping. Outside, a car engine turned over. She listened, waited. Silence. The next morning, Arya made a decision. She texted Benji and told him to stay low. She encrypted a copy of the flash drive contents and uploaded it to an offshore server she'd used only once before. Back in Season 2, when she'd exposed a small-town judge laundering drug money through cemetery deeds. At noon, she sat on her balcony with coffee gone cold and opened the envelope she hadn't dared to until now. Sheriff Cobb had left it with her after the interview, marked private, for your eyes only. Inside was a photocopy of a page from an old police log. The name on the report matched the tape. Holden, David. Presidio County. May 18th, 2002. The report summary was brief, vague, frustrating. Caller claimed subject left Marfa heading west, never arrived, no evidence of vehicle wreckage. Highway search yielded nothing. Case handed to federal authorities. All documentation reassigned to USMILCOM. At the bottom of the page, written in Cobb's handwriting, was a note. They pulled jurisdiction the second I filed the report. Not FBI, not local feds. Some other branch. Not sure we're supposed to have branches we don't know about. There was one final line. If you go digging, make sure you're willing to vanish. Arya folded the page slowly and returned it to the envelope. The sun was sharp and clear over Austin, but the air felt thinner than usual. She looked out over the city and whispered to no one in particular. Too late for that. The day after the interview aired, Arya's inbox flooded. Dozens of emails, some praising her courage, some calling it fake news, others wrapped in tin-foil paranoia about aliens, mind control, and underground prisons. She knew the drill. Every season of Subsurface brought in the fringe, but this time felt different. 3 messages stood out. No sender, no signature. Just blank subject lines, each with an attachment. A single photograph. The first was a blurry still from a VHS tape. 2 men in military fatigue standing near a desert radar tower. One of them looked like David Holden, 20 years younger. The second was a scan of a file folder labeled Sightglass, Phase 1. The stamp was familiar now. Majestic 6. The third was an image of her, from 2 days ago, sitting at the cafe with Benji. Her hands trembled as she closed her laptop. A knock at the door made her jump. She grabbed her recorder instinctively, like it could shield her from whoever was outside. But it wasn't a shadowy figure in black. It was a package. No label, just a manila envelope tucked under her doormat. Inside was a burned CD, unmarked. She stared at it for a long time before placing it into her old portable drive. The screen flickered, then loaded a single video file titled debrief_0708_Holden. She hit play. The footage opened with a timestamp, July 8, 1996. Location redacted. David Holden sat at a metal table in what looked like a government interview room. His uniform was stiff, his posture straight, but there was something off in his eyes. Not fear, something heavier, like he'd seen something that had bent the world slightly out of shape. A voice from off-screen, digitally altered, asked the first question. Colonel Holden, when did you first become aware of the operation parameters for Sightglass? 1992, Holden replied, after the failure of Stargate and the compartmentalization of Artichoke. We were told this was the ethical reboot, civilian monitoring only, behavioral testing through passive input. And you believed that? At first. What changed? The kids, when they started using the kids. Arya paused the video. She sat still in her chair, absorbing the words. Her mind pinged back to the Latin seal. To forget. This wasn't just surveillance. This was manipulation, reprogramming, erasure. She watched the rest of the video without blinking. You participated willingly, the voice said. Until I saw the trials, Holden replied. Until I saw them make a boy believe he had never known his own mother. They rewrote everything, with lights, with pulses, with scripts embedded in white noise. Did they succeed? They made him forget she existed. When she showed up at the compound, he screamed, said she was a spy. They had to sedate him. Was the boy returned to civilian life? He was relocated. Arya stopped the playback. She reached for her notebook and wrote one name, Juno Beckett. She didn't know why it came to her, only that she'd heard it whispered once in connection to Stargate. The government's now declassified experiment with remote viewing, psychic espionage, and fringe neuropsychology. She began digging. By nightfall, she found her. Juno Beckett had been a cognitive specialist working under DIA subcontractors in the late 80s. Her name appeared in declassified memos as a civilian consultant for the failed Stargate project. The last known record placed her in Utah in 1999. Then, nothing. Disappeared. No social presence, no employment records, no death certificate. Buried. But a ghost forum for remote viewing conspiracy theorists had a post from 2014 titled, "If anyone finds Beckett, tell her it worked." The thread was dead, full of dead links and inside jokes. Except one reply had a GPS coordinate embedded in the image metadata. Northern Utah. Mountains. Remote. She knew where she had to go. But she wouldn't go alone. The next morning she reached out to Elijah Grant. He had worked for the FBI as a behavioral analyst during the early 2000s. His specialty, counterintelligence recruitment. She had interviewed him once before, briefly, during a previous season on political cults. He was measured, intelligent, and walked with the quiet guilt of someone who knew how deep the darkness could go. They met in person 2 days later in the back of an old bookstore, hidden between 2 abandoned blocks on the edge of downtown Austin. Grant looked older now, grayer, his posture straighter, like he hadn't yet let himself breathe freely. "I heard the episode," he said. "I knew someone would poke that corpse eventually." "You know about sight glass?" Arya asked. He nodded slowly. "I wasn't cleared for the whole program," he said, "but I knew of it. At Quantico, we had briefings about failed projects. Ghost files. Sightglass was always the one with no outcome. Just silence. Holden was part of it. He left the program and disappeared." Grant didn't look surprised. They always disappear. Or they come back with new names and empty eyes. She showed him the flash drive. He didn't touch it. "I'm not opening that unless we're on clean systems. No Wi-Fi, no microphones." "I think someone's following me," she said. Grant leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. "They are, and they'll keep following until they decide you're not a threat. Or until you are." She hesitated. "Do you think Jaime's still alive?" Grant looked away. "I think he was supposed to forget everything. But if he didn't?" His voice trailed off. She understood what he meant. If Jaime remembered, they wouldn't let him live. They set the plan in motion that night. Arya backed up everything, every email, the tape, the Sightglass files, onto a secure offline system that Grant had built years ago, using hardware from the early 2000s. Nothing modern, nothing hackable. They studied the files for hours. The folder tree was a twisted mess of acronyms and corrupted logs, but a subfolder labeled Ghost Protocol opened cleanly. Inside were 6 files, each named after a person. 4 were dead. Arya confirmed it with public records. The 5th was Holden. The 6th was redacted. Only a single metadata tag remained. Juno 26B. Arya's pulse quickened. Beckett wasn't a footnote. She was a survivor. They booked flights that night, under aliases. Arya packed light, just her laptop, notebook, and a burner phone. Grant brought nothing but a map, a sealed envelope labeled "In Case," and a pistol he didn't try to hide. As they boarded the flight, Arya glanced over her shoulder. A man in a dark coat sat 3 rows behind them, reading a newspaper with no headlines on the front page. She nudged Grant. "We have company." He didn't turn. "Good," he said. "Means we're going in the right direction." The air in West Texas was sharp and dry, the kind of dryness that seemed to pull your thoughts out through your skin. As the rental car cruised down Highway 90, the landscape flattened around them. Low brush, scorched soil, and a distant horizon that refused to move. It felt like driving into a memory. Arya had always thought of deserts as empty places, void of meaning. Now it felt the opposite. This stretch of road between Alpine and Marfa was filled with something heavy and unspoken, like the silence here had a shape. Beside her, Elijah Grant sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, eyes on the passing terrain like it might suddenly blink and reveal its secrets. They drove past mile marker 68. the same stretch where David Holden and Jaime had vanished 2 decades ago. "You feel that?" Grant said. "What?" He tilted his head slightly. "Static, like your ears want to pop but never do." She hadn't noticed it until he said something. Now it was all she could hear. A faint pressure, like something humming just out of frequency. They passed a rusted sign. "Welcome to Marfa." The town looked like time had tried to forget it. Old diners, a 2-pump gas station, art galleries mixed with trailers and abandoned storefronts. Tourists passed through sometimes, drawn by the legend of the Marfa lights, those mysterious orbs that flickered over the desert at night. But Arya wasn't here for lights. She was here for shadows. They parked near the courthouse and walked into the Main Street Diner, the kind of place where everyone looked up when the bell over the door jingled. A ceiling fan stirred the dry air above faded booths. Old cowboy songs drifted in from a radio behind the counter. An older man behind the bar watched them, eyes narrow. Grant ordered 2 coffees and leaned on the counter. "We're looking for someone. Maybe you knew him. David Holden. Came through here in 2002. With his grandson." The man stared back. "Don't know the name." Grant didn't flinch. "Red Bronco. Parked outside of town. They disappeared a few miles west. You were probably working here back then." The man said nothing for a beat too long. "I remember the Bronco," he finally said. "Feds showed up before we knew they were missing. Swept the whole area. Made it clear we weren't to ask questions." Arya leaned in. "Did anyone talk to them? Holden or the boy?" "Number. But someone saw them stop by the south edge of town, out near the old rail yard." "Who?" "Tomas Reyes," the man said, drying a glass. "Used to do maintenance for the line. Saw him talking to someone in a suit. Said it looked tense. Where is he now? VA hospital, Odessa, PTSD. Might still have something worth hearing." Arya scribbled the name down, but the man spoke again before she could leave. "You really want to know what happened?" he asked. "That's why we're here." He looked around, then stepped closer. The night they vanished, I saw them. Not up close, just from the road. Their car was parked near the hills. Lights off. No movement. He hesitated. Then something else pulled up. Black sedan. No plates. And then? When I looked again, both vehicles were gone. As they left the diner, the heat had begun to settle low in the sky. Arya felt the sweat beneath her collar, the dry sting behind her eyes. The town was too quiet. They drove south, toward the rail yard. The tracks were rusted over now, wild grass creeping through them like the earth trying to reclaim what had been abandoned. Beyond the fence line, scrap metal, twisted signs, and a half-buried shipping container stood under the long shadow of a hill. Grant pulled out the old map from Benji, the one with the red dots. "There's something out here," he said. "Holden stopped here for a reason." They climbed through a broken section of fence and made their way toward the hill. A half hour of searching turned up nothing but rocks and sunburn. Just as Arya was ready to call it, Grant knelt by a patch of dry ground and brushed away dust. A slab of rusted metal peeked through. "Help me," he said. Together they uncovered a square door, old, sun-bleached, and bolted shut. No handle, just 4 small holes on the surface and a faint groove like a fingerprint spiral. "Bunker?" Arya asked. "Storage hatch maybe, military grade. This wasn't built by locals." They didn't open it. Not yet, not without knowing what lay below. They marked the location and hiked back to the car in silence. That night they stayed in a worn motel on the edge of town. The room smelled of bleach and dust, the kind of place meant for passing through. Arya laid out the printed files across the bed. Photos, notes from Benji, frames from the Holden tape. Grant pulled a bottle of water from the mini-fridge and sat across from her. "I've been thinking," he said. "Sight glass wasn't about surveillance. Not really. What was it then?" He tapped a photo. Holden's debriefing still. It was about control, not watching people, rewriting them, teaching the brain to reject certain realities and accept others. A new kind of warfare. Arya stared at the image of Jaime smiling in the Bronco. So what was Jaime? A prototype or a casualty? A knock came at the door. They both froze. Grant moved first, quietly, pulling the pistol from his bag and stepping to the side of the frame. Arya approached and opened the door slowly. No one was there. Just a folded piece of paper, taped to the outside. She grabbed it and shut the door. 3 words were scrawled on the front. "You're too late!" Arya's pulse spiked. She opened the paper. Inside was a photo, grainy, night vision. A body, half buried in sand. A child's shoe visible at the edge of the frame. She staggered back. "No name, no coordinates," she said, voice thin. Grant took the photo, studied it, then checked his watch. "That photo's old," he said. "Look at the timestamp, Iki bin Dort." He paused. "They want us to think he's dead, that we missed him." "But we didn't," Arya said quietly, "because someone doesn't leave a message unless there's still a threat." They packed that night, left town before sunrise. Before they drove off, Arya looked out across the desert one last time. In the distance, faint and flickering, 3 pale orbs hovered over the horizon, the Marfa lights. She didn't believe in ghosts, but she believed in surveillance, and those lights had been documented since the 50s. No cause, no source, no explanation. Only one theory, once whispered by a former intelligence contractor she'd interviewed years ago. "Those lights aren't aliens," he had said. "They're reflection markers, triggers, used in field conditioning. When the lights come on, the memory shuts off." The VA hospital in Odessa was a beige monolith at the edge of a wind-blown lot, surrounded by sand, weeds, and silence. The parking lot was half empty. Inside, everything smelled like antiseptic and old plastic. Arya hated hospitals, not for the death, but for how people seemed to fade inside them, like memory loss definition in fluorescent light. Tomas Reyes was in Ward 4, tucked behind the psych wing. A nurse led them through 2 locked doors and into a room where the blinds were drawn, and the TV buzzed quietly with static. The man in the bed didn't look like the hardened military contractor they expected. He looked used. His skin was pale, his body thin, but his eyes flicked open the moment the door clicked. "You're the girl with the voice," he said before either of them spoke. "The podcast." Arya froze mid-step. Tomas gave a weak smile. "They play it in here. Don't think I don't know." Grant pulled a chair close to the bed. "We came to ask about David Holden." Tomas blinked. "David? Yeah, I figured. It's been years since anyone said his name out loud." Arya sat opposite him. "You saw him here, in Marfa, 2 days before he vanished." Tomas looked at the ceiling. He was nervous, shaky. That wasn't like him. Said he found something on the last route, that they'd come for him and the kid. Told me not to trust anyone in uniform. "What did he find?" Grant asked. "They never tell you outright," Tomas said. "They just say it in half sentences. He had something, files, data, maybe names, but it wasn't just about names, it was about what was done to them." Arya leaned in. "Done to who?" Tomas looked at her like the question was too simple. "To us. To the ones who signed up and didn't know what we were signing." His breathing rattled for a moment, and he closed his eyes. "They put us through tests," he said. "Sleep deprivation, pattern loops, strobe induction. Made us hear voices, think things that weren't ours. Some of us cracked. Some of us remembered." "You remembered," Arya said. "I remembered enough to know forgetting is safer." He coughed. A fleck of blood appeared on the blanket. "I didn't tell them anything," he whispered. "But I left something behind. Holden told me if they got to him, I should pass it on." "Pass what?" Thomas pointed to the drawer near the bed. Inside was a key. "You'll find a lockbox," he said, 2 miles north of the old training ground, West Ridge, under the Joshua tree with 2 trunks. I buried it with my discharge papers." "What's in it?" Grant asked. Tomas gave a dry laugh. Nothing good. His eyes drifted shut, and he didn't speak again. They left the hospital just after sunset, the sky blood-red in the rear view as they drove east. It was dark by the time they reached the location. The training ground was long since decommissioned. Empty trailers, collapsed tents, scorched fire pits. The air smelled like burned wood and old secrets. Grant found the Joshua tree first, its twin trunks twisting toward the stars like something unnatural. Beneath it, they dug for nearly an hour in silence, the only sounds the crunch of shovels and their breathing. Then metal scraped metal. Arya knelt and cleared the dirt. A rusted lockbox lay buried beneath an old army poncho, sealed tight. Inside were reel-to-reel tapes, faded photographs, and a thick folder marked Ghost Protocol in block print. The photos were disturbing, shots of people in labs, their eyes forced open, blinking lights reflected in their pupils. There were children, too. Young, confused. Arya flipped through the documents, heart pounding. Diagrams, neurocharts, logs with patient numbers and exposure times. Subject: 9B. Initial disassociation at 42 minutes. Memory regression achieved after third pulse sequence. Reports of implanted narrative successful in 3 out of 5. Another page. Project directive. Field implementation viable. Recommended pilot locations, educational campuses, rural detention facilities, low-density public environments. Behavioral modification appears stable. She felt sick. These weren't just tests, she said. They were field trials. Grant didn't speak. He held up one of the photographs. It showed a young boy sitting in a white-walled room, electrodes taped to his temples. The file name etched beneath, Subject J13. Arya stared at it. Jaime. She knew it. They used him, she said. They tested on him. Grant exhaled, voice tight. And then they tried to erase it. He took a small reel from the box, no label, just a strip of tape wound tight. He slipped it into a player Arya carried in her gear bag and pressed play. A low hum. Then voices. Then Holden's voice, clear and close. If you're hearing this, I'm already gone. They got to Reyes. They're closing in on us. I don't know how long we have, but I need you to understand, Jaime doesn't remember what they did. But he will, and when he does, they'll come for him too. They called it sight glass. It was supposed to protect us, but what it really did was break the pieces inside us and scatter them across memory. Like a mirror, shattered and rearranged. They don't want you to know, because if you do, you'll start remembering too. The audio hissed out. Arya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of it pressed down. It wasn't just a whistleblower's paranoia. It was a confession. They returned to the motel in silence. Outside their door was another note, taped to the frame. Leave it buried. This time, no photo, just a thumb drive. They plugged it in. Inside was a list. Names: Holden, Reyes, Beckett. Then dozens more, many crossed out. Beside each name a status: KIA, MIA, suicide, deceased. Some were marked redacted. Arya scrolled to the bottom. One name glowed on the list: uncrossed, unredacted. Jaime Holden. Beside it, exposure level, unstable, location, unknown. She met Grant's eyes. He's alive. Grant nodded slowly. And they know it. The name list haunted her. Arya stared at it for hours that night, lit only by the flicker of her laptop screen and the soft, rhythmic hum of the motel's faulty air conditioning unit. Most of the names were strangers, soldiers, scientists, consultants, civilians. But they weren't random. Every person on the list had touched something, seen something, and nearly all of them were dead. Some had died in accidents, some by suicide, others in suspicious classified incidents that were barely more than ghost entries in military databases. She recognized 2 names from deep archival dives: both former behavioral analysts who had gone off-grid in 2004. There were 87 names in total. 63 were crossed out. 2 had question marks beside them. 1 was hers, Aria Kent. No designation, no status. Just a blank space next to her name. "I've been on their radar longer than I thought," she muttered. Grant sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees. The lockbox opened between them. "They started tracking you the second you opened the flash drive," he said. "But they probably flagged your name during Season 1. You were sniffing too close to their early work." She thought back to her first big story. A re-education facility for troubled teens in Arizona that used behavioral immersion techniques. They had described it as rehabilitation through stimulus. It sounded a lot like sight glass now. "How far does this go?" she asked. Grant didn't answer. He just handed her a page he'd pulled from the lockbox. It was a printout of a satellite image. Grainy, blurry, but clearly marked with coordinates. Beside it, a code. Site R12, secondary deployment, civilian passive range. There was a handwritten note beneath it. Relocation order approved 2004, primary asset, H13. Aria traced her finger along the edge of the page. "Jaime," she said softly. "They moved him. Somewhere quiet. Off-grid." Her mind reeled. She remembered what Reyes had said. Holden found something on the last route. Maybe it had been this. A facility. A planned extraction. Maybe Jaime wasn't just a victim. Maybe he was the center of the whole thing. She clicked through the list again. It was alphabetized, with scattered annotations. Blood types, locations, project code names, psychological profiles. Halfway through, her stomach turned. A name leapt out at her. Kenneth Kent, her father. Next to his name, status, MIA, Iraq, 2004. Assignment, sight glass, Vector 4. Her hands went cold. She had been 12 when the military told her father's convoy had gone missing outside Fallujah. She remembered the funeral with no body, the folded flag, her mother sitting stone still in the front row. But here, in this file, it wasn't listed as combat death. It wasn't listed as war at all. He was part of the project. She backed away from the screen. "Aria?" Grant asked quietly. She didn't answer. He stood slowly, reading the name over her shoulder. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear to you." "He wasn't supposed to be part of this," she whispered. "He was just a communications officer. That's all. That's what they told us." She scrolled down to the annotation. "Subject transferred to internal review. Never recovered. Presumed compromised." Her throat tightened. They had erased her father. Not in the desert, not in a war. Here, in this project. "I need to find out what happened to him," she said. "We will," Grant said. "But you need to be ready for the answer." She nodded. Later that night, after Grant had fallen asleep, Aria sat alone on the balcony, staring at the motel parking lot. A car pulled in every hour or so. Trucks, locals. No one lingered, but one SUV stayed longer than the others. Tinted windows, engine off. Aria didn't move. She simply wrote a name on the corner of her notebook, Juno Beckett. Then beside it, Project, Vector 4. Assigned K. Kent. She needed to find Beckett, now more than ever. If her father had been involved, if he had seen the things Holden saw, if he had tried to get out, Beckett might be the only one left who could tell her what he tried to do. She checked her burner phone. The coordinates she pulled from the old conspiracy forum thread were still there. The GPS ping placed it near a ridge in southern Utah, deep in canyon territory. No marked roads, no signs of civilization. Grant agreed without hesitation. Beckett was part of the core research team, he said. If she's alive, she's the last unburned piece of sight glass. They loaded the car at dawn and left Texas behind, heading northwest into a world neither of them fully understood yet. But the shadows were growing. As they crossed into New Mexico, Arya turned on her laptop to recheck the list. A red bar flashed across the top. New entry detected. She clicked. It was a new name. No description, no ID number. Just 3 words. Arya Kent, monitored. And a timestamp. Location, US 70, 7:21 a.m. The system was tracking her in real time. She shut the laptop fast and looked over at Grant. "They've locked onto me." He didn't panic. He just tapped the pistol holstered under his coat and said, "Then let's give them something to chase." The Utah desert was a graveyard of heat and stone. Days passed in silence, broken only by the wind curling through narrow canyon mouths and the crunch of tires over gravel. The GPS ping had long since gone dark. Cell reception faded before they reached the trailhead. From here on, it was guesswork and intuition. They left the car under a canvas of stars and hiked north into a slot canyon, following no trail, only a worn line of bent sage and crushed dust. Arya carried a pack with 3 liters of water, a solar charger, and 2 copies of the list, one encrypted on a burner drive, the other printed and sealed in a plastic folder. She didn't know why, but it felt right to bring the physical copy. "Still think she's alive?" she asked after an hour. Grant's boots crunched over the sand behind her. "She was smart," he said. "If anyone knew how to stay out of reach, it's Beckett." The canyon narrowed until the red walls leaned close. At a split in the rock, they saw it. A small metal marker buried into the stone. Not visible from the trail. Not obvious, but intentional. A triangle. Unlabeled. Just 3 sharp lines etched into the steel. "Same symbol from the sightglass file," Arya whispered. They turned left, following the signal. By noon, they saw the cabin. Wood and stone, built low into the canyon wall, nearly invisible unless you knew to look. A rain barrel, a hand-dug well, and smoke, thin and gray, curling from a stovepipe. Someone was still inside. Arya and Grant approached slowly. They didn't call out. They didn't draw weapons. They knocked. Nothing. They knocked again. Then the door opened. Juno Beckett was not what Arya expected. She was older, late 60s, maybe 70, skin leathered from sun, eyes the color of tarnished silver. She wore faded jeans, a canvas jacket, and a belt knife she didn't bother to hide. "You're late," she said, stepping aside. "I figured you'd come a week ago." "You were expecting us?" Arya asked. "I was expecting someone." Juno's voice was dry, but not unkind. The project couldn't stay buried forever. Inside, the cabin was spare. Books stacked in piles, notebooks bound with twine, a solar-powered radio with the antenna looped toward the sky. On the far wall hung a photo of David Holden, black and white, pinned beside a hand-drawn map of the Four Corners region. Grant didn't sit. Arya did. Beckett poured tea from a metal kettle and said nothing for a long time. "You're here for answers," she finally said. "But I don't think you'll like them." "We already don't," Grant replied. Juno looked at Arya. "You're Kent's daughter." Arya stiffened. "You knew him?" "I recruited him." Arya's voice cracked. "For what?" Beckett looked into the cup in her hands like it might show her a different time. "For the end." The room fell still. "Sightglass wasn't about behavior," she continued. "Not really, that was a cover. The goal was adaptation. To teach the brain to change faster than evolution ever could. Faster than trauma. Faster than grief." "Change into what?" Arya asked. "Into whatever we told it to be." She set the cup down. "We used visual sequences, audio loops, temperature spikes, chemical interference. Every sense had a script. If you felt it, we could rewrite it. That was the theory." "And the reality?" Grant asked. "Chaos," Beckett said. "Some subjects became unresponsive. Others relived false memories. A few adapted too well." She opened a drawer and pulled out a folder, no label, just a paperclip holding it shut. Inside were 6 photos. Each showed a different subject. Civilian, military, young, old. Each had the same vacant eyes. "We created ghosts," she said. "People with the bodies of men, the habits of soldiers, but no origin, no self." "And Jaime?" Arya asked. Beckett's face changed, just slightly. A flicker of regret. He wasn't meant to be in the program. Holden volunteered. Jaime was collateral. He witnessed something he shouldn't have. Holden brought him on the run to protect him, not realizing Jaime had already been exposed. Arya's voice was a whisper. Exposed to what? To the final sequence. Juno stood and walked to the fireplace. Above it, a small locked cabinet hung on the wall. She retrieved a key from her boot and opened it. Inside was a VHS tape, labeled in faded red marker, Vector, J13, Final. Beckett held it with both hands, almost reverently. "Only 2 copies exist, this one and the original in Langley's vault." She handed it to Arya. "What's on it?" Arya asked. "Jaime's sequence, the one they ran before Holden fled." "Why keep it?" Grant asked. Beckett smiled, bitter. "Because when they erase enough of you, you start saving the scraps just to remember what you lost." They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of it all settling around them. Then Beckett leaned forward, voice lower. "There's one more thing," she said. "Your father didn't die in Iraq." Arya froze. "He was transferred," Beckett continued, "after the program fell apart. They moved him to a classified substation, outside jurisdiction, buried under Homeland's disaster response training. I don't know if he's alive, but he wasn't dead when they took him." Arya closed her eyes. All those years, the silence, the lies. He had been alive, possibly still was. She opened her eyes slowly. "Where?" she asked. Beckett didn't hesitate. "Fort Vesper, northern Nevada, buried beneath the desert, off every map." Arya stood. "We're going." Grant followed without question. Beckett didn't try to stop them. She only said, "If you find him, he may not remember you." Arya didn't look back. She clutched the tape in her hand like it was a lifeline, because it was. Fort Vesper didn't exist on any map. Even Beckett's coordinates were imprecise, more guesswork than confirmation. It was never listed in government databases, had no official founding date, and didn't appear on declassified military installation lists. It had been erased by design. The road north was long and unmarked. Arya and Grant left Utah at dusk, driving in silence through vast emptiness until the canyons flattened into high desert plains. No towns, no fuel, only scrub, dust, and power lines that led nowhere. They followed Beckett's hand-sketched map through a dried riverbed and up into a range of crumbling red hills. After 40 miles of off-road crawl, the land began to change. The brush stopped growing. The sand darkened. Static buzzed faintly on the car radio, even though it wasn't tuned to anything. Just beyond a rusted cattle gate, a chain-link fence came into view. It stretched across the valley floor, sagging, forgotten, except for one detail. The barbed wire still glinted. New, sharp, maintained. Grant shut off the engine. "We're here." The perimeter was unguarded, at least visibly. No towers, no patrols, but they both knew that didn't mean it was abandoned. They climbed through a gap in the fencing and walked until they saw the entrance. It was buried into the side of a ridge. A concrete hatch, partially covered by earth, flanked by 2 air vents and a floodlight that hadn't been turned on in years. But when Arya ran her fingers along the steel door, she felt it. Warmth. There was still power running inside. Grant found the keypad panel hidden under a layer of dirt. It hummed when he brushed it clean. "Still live," he said. "I thought this place was decommissioned," Arya whispered. Grant looked at her. "No one decommissions ghosts. They just stop writing about them." The keypad required a 6-digit code. Arya pulled out the Sightglass personnel list from the lockbox files. Next to Holden's name, an ID number, 108724. She typed it in. The door hissed open. Inside was darkness, thick and sterile. The air smelled of ozone and dust. Their footsteps echoed as they entered a long corridor lit only by emergency strips that pulsed red every 10 feet. "Stay close," Grant said. "We don't know how deep this goes." They passed sealed doors, broken scanners, and walls lined with obsolete tech. CRT monitors stacked in threes, biometric readers hanging loose from exposed wires. Some rooms were flooded with sand. Others looked untouched, like someone had just stepped out for lunch and never returned. Deeper inside, the silence grew unnatural. Then, as they rounded a corner, Arya stopped. The hallway ahead was spotless, lit with overhead LEDs, climate-controlled, clean. "This part's still in use," she said. They crept forward until they reached a glass-paneled control room. Inside, 3 monitors flickered. One displayed a heart rate, another, neural activity. The third, surveillance footage. Arya leaned in. A figure sat in a white room, motionless, hooked to a wall of wires. Male, mid-40s, shaved head, blank eyes. She knew that posture. Her father used to sit just like that when reading in uniform, upright, composed, locked inside his own mind. "Zoom it," she said. Grant tapped the monitor controls until the camera adjusted. Arya's breath hitched. The man looked older, thinner, but the jawline, the nose, the scar under the right eye. It was him. Kenneth Kent, her father, alive. She stepped back in shock. "He's here." Grant stared at the monitor. "But how much of him is left?" The door to the observation corridor was sealed with a biometric lock. A small fingerprint scanner blinked red beside the frame. Arya pressed her hand against it on impulse. The light turned green. The door opened. "Why did that work?" she asked. Grant looked at her with grim understanding. "Because this place still knows your DNA and probably expects you to come back." They entered the room slowly. The man didn't move. He was strapped to the chair, wires feeding into his scalp, neck, and spine. Monitors beeped softly. A machine nearby pumped fluid through clear tubes. Arya knelt beside him. "Dad?" No response. She touched his hand, cold, but not lifeless. "Dad, it's me. Arya. Still nothing." She turned to the machine. One monitor displayed a word. "Subject, K-47, active, dormant memory state." "I don't understand," she whispered. "They shelved him," Grant said. "Deep programming, probably wiped his surface memory, locked him into a loop." Arya stared at the wires. "We have to bring him back." Grant hesitated. "You try to pull him out, and this whole place could go hot. He may have a kill switch embedded." "I don't care." She reached for the main monitor and tapped through the console menu. A prompt appeared. Override sequence. Manual input required. She input the only code she could think of. The final digits from her father's personnel file. 198404. The system paused. Then another prompt. Voice confirmation, kin authorization. She swallowed hard. Arya Kent, daughter, confirming. The system beeped. Then, override approved. Subject K-47, waking sequence initiated. The lights in the room dimmed. The pulse monitor jumped. A low hum filled the air. Her father twitched once, then again. His eyes opened, blank, empty. Then slowly, recognition flickered. He stared at her. "Arya?" His voice was dry, broken. How are you here?" Tears hit her cheeks before she felt them. "I found you," she whispered. "I found the tape. I know about Sightglass, about Jaime, about everything." His eyes widened, then winced in pain. "Too loud," he said, gripping the chair. "They're still inside. We'll get you out." He looked at Grant, then back at her. "They'll come," he said. "Once they know I'm awake. The sequence is linked. Everything's connected." Arya grabbed his hand. "We can disable it. There has to be a failsafe." "There is," her father whispered. "But it's not in here." "Where then?" He struggled to speak. "Subject, J13. He carries the key. He always did." Jaime, still alive. Still part of this. Before she could ask more, the alarm blared. A red light lit the corridor. Unauthorized access. Lockdown engaged. "They know we're here," Grant said. "We have to move." "I'm not leaving him." "We won't. But we need to cut power or this place will seal shut." Arya turned back to her father. "We're coming back. I swear. You hold on." He nodded faintly. "Fine, Jaime. He'll know how to end it." The emergency sirens grew louder. They ran. They didn't drive out of Fort Vesper. They ran. The facility had sealed behind them like a tomb, steel doors clanging shut with a finality that left no question. Return was not guaranteed. Arya didn't look back, not even when the Claxons died behind the ridge. Her father was alive, and that changed everything, but it also raised the stakes. If he'd been buried this deep, then Jaime, Subject J13, wasn't just another name. He was the failsafe. They camped that night 30 miles north, deep in the Nevada backlands. Arya sat with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, staring into a fire that spat occasional sparks into the dark. The sky was clear and cruel, full of stars that didn't blink. She held her father's dog tag in her hand. He'd torn it off before they ran, left it with her like an anchor. Grant stirred the fire. "You think Jaime knows who he is? I think he's trying to remember, and I think he's running from it." They hadn't spoken much during the escape. Too focused, too aware that something, somewhere, was watching. Arya opened her notebook and turned to the page marked OP Sight Glass Vector Phase. At the bottom of Beckett's transcript was a phrase she'd almost skipped the first time. Phase 3 requires environmental priming through field integration. Initiation sequence to be delivered via carrier. J13 only. "What does that mean?" she asked aloud. Grant looked over. "Jaime's more than a survivor. He's a delivery system." "A system for what?" "For the trigger." She didn't respond. She knew what he meant. In her time reporting on behavioral experiments, Arya had come across a now discredited concept known as neural seeding, the idea that certain memories, ideas, or emotions could be implanted so deeply they could spread like a virus. Sightglass didn't just rewrite memory, it replicated it. Grant pulled out his laptop, rigged to a secure satellite link. He opened a software system he hadn't shown her before. Lines of tracking data spilled across the screen. Passive surveillance feeds, scrubbed facial recognition logs, even dormant military access points tied to Spectre-class programs. "Government doesn't forget faces," he said, "even if it wants to." He keyed in Jaime Holden's last known image, taken from the Holden tape. A boy, 13, laughing behind a windshield. Then he aged it 20 years. The system generated a model, jawline sharper, eyes the same. The results returned 2 hits. Both were partial matches, one in rural Montana, one in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The Montana match had been flagged in 2014 as unconfirmed, DOD clearance blocked. No image, no details. But the second hit had a timestamp. 3 days ago, gas station surveillance outside Albuquerque. A man buying water and fuel, quiet, alone. Arya leaned closer. The camera caught his face in profile. Not enough for certainty, but her gut knew. "That's him," she whispered. Grant nodded. "We move at dawn." The drive south was uneventful, but the silence felt loaded. Every rest stop felt like a trap. Every phone signal spiked like a warning. By evening, they reached the gas station. The owner, an old man with a crossword puzzle habit, confirmed it. "Quiet kid. Paid in cash. Wore a military jacket, old one. Eyes didn't blink much." "Where'd he go?" Arya asked. "Didn't say, but he took a flyer off the window." Hiking group up near the Sandia foothills. Said he used to go there with his grandfather. She stared at the flyer, still half hanging by tape. Lost Trail, Veterans Memorial Hike. Annual event held in the mountain range east of the city. Hosted by retired military volunteers. No registration, no ID checks. Just show up. He's going back, she said. Grant raised a brow. To what? Not what. Who? He's trying to remember Holden. They arrived before sunrise. The trailhead was quiet, empty, except for 3 parked trucks and a small canvas tent at the base. A volunteer offered them maps, asked no questions. They started the hike at dawn. The trail wound upward through pine groves and high desert, switchbacking past ridges and empty shelters. They hiked in silence, scanning every face, every bend in the trail. The higher they climbed, the clearer the air became, and yet it felt harder to breathe. Halfway to the summit, Arya froze. A man stood alone at the overlook, facing the valley below. His back was turned, hands in his pockets, a tan field jacket resting against his frame. She recognized the slope of his shoulders. She stepped forward. He turned slightly, just enough. It was Jaime, older, gaunt, but unmistakable. Their eyes met. He didn't run. He didn't speak. He just stared like someone looking into a dream they hadn't expected to remember. Jaime, she said. He blinked slowly. I didn't think anyone would come. We've been looking for you. I know. He turned back toward the valley. I don't know what's real anymore, he said. I get flashes. People I don't remember, rooms with lights, maps I never studied. Then I see him, my grandfather. He's in all of them. Arya took a step closer. You were part of a project. Sight glass. He flinched. That word. I've heard it in my sleep. You were programmed, Jaime. They made you forget. But something survived. You're remembering, and they're scared of what you'll unlock. He looked at her again. There's a phrase, he whispered. Keeps repeating in my head, every time I close my eyes. What is it? He hesitated, then said it. Memory is a weapon. The words hung in the air. Arya felt something shift. Grant moved beside her, his expression unreadable. Jaime looked between them. They sent someone after me, he said. I've seen the same car 4 times. I think I'm being watched. You are, Arya said. But you're not alone anymore. She handed him the VHS tape Beckett had given her. Jaime stared at it. This is the one, isn't it? The final sequence, she said. The one they used on you. Jaime held it like it might burn through his skin. Then it's time I see it. That night they stayed in a cabin on the edge of the range. No phones, no signal. Jaime sat by the fire, the tape still in his hand. I remember something, he said. Not clearly, but enough. Arya leaned forward. Tell me. There was a room, Jaime said. Underground, white walls. They made me watch a screen. Just colors and shapes, but I couldn't move, couldn't look away. What did they show you? People I didn't know. A man they said was dangerous. They told me I'd see him one day, that I'd recognize the face, that when I did, I'd know what to do. Arya's skin prickled. What would you do? Jaime didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward her slowly. I think they trained me to kill someone. They waited until full dark. The tape had been converted to digital format using Beckett's old equipment. The screen was small. The room was silent. The file sat on Arya's laptop, labeled in plain black font, Vector J13 Final. Jaime didn't move for a long time. He sat cross-legged on the cabin floor, hands clasped in his lap. Grant stood by the door, arms crossed, silent but alert. Arya hovered near the laptop, fingers on the trackpad. Jaime exhaled. Start it. The video began. A timestamp flickered in the corner. March 15th, 2002, 2:43 a.m. The footage was raw, grainy. A fixed camera looked down into a white room. Jaime sat in a chair, 13 years old. Wires attached to his skull. A screen across from him displayed shifting colors, green to blue to red, then spirals, circles, then a face, his own. The room's audio was a mess of distortion, but embedded within was a voice, low, even modulated. You are safe. You are watched. He is not your blood. The enemy wears his name. Then again, you are safe. You are watched. He is not your blood. The enemy wears his name. Over and over. Then, a photograph appeared on the screen. Arya froze. It was David Holden. The voice changed. Target, Holden. Status, breach. You must protect. You must erase. Jaime's body in the footage trembled. His eyes glazed. His lips moved silently. In the present, older Jaime began to rock gently, fists clenched on his knees. Arya reached for the pause key, but he stopped her with a single whisper. No. The tape continued. More sequences. Holden's face again. Then another. Kenneth Kent, Arya's father. The screen shifted. A command loop began. Recognition protocol. If subject J13 encounters target vector 4, protective override will initiate. Do not question. Do not remember. Respond. Jaime in the video repeated one word over and over. Respond. Arya shut the laptop. Enough. Jaime stared into space, his breath fast and shallow. Grant stepped forward, but didn't touch him. Jaime, what are you feeling? Jaime's voice cracked. I remember the room, the voice. It wasn't a dream. Arya sat beside him. They buried it, but not deep enough. Jaime covered his face with both hands. They made me forget my own grandfather, he said. They made me think he was the threat. And now you remember, Arya said, and that makes you dangerous to them. No, he whispered. It makes me dangerous to you. Grant's eyes narrowed. Why? Jaime stood and backed away. I've been triggered before, he said. I think that's what I am, a trigger, a weapon waiting for a face to match a command. Arya moved slowly. Then we break it. You're not alone now. You don't have to follow the program. Jaime looked at her, and for a moment, he wasn't 13. And he wasn't the lost man at the gas station. He was something else. Something uncertain. Fragmented. I need to go, he said. Go where? I need to see him. Who? Jaime didn't hesitate. Your father. Arya stared at him. Why? Because I think they meant for me to kill him. And if I don't go now, someone else will. They left before dawn, heading east through the high plains. Grant drove in silence. Arya sat with the laptop open again, reviewing every frame of the video, searching for anything, any anomaly, embedded code, image metadata that could explain how the command loop worked. But it wasn't code, it was conditioning. They didn't control Jaime with a switch. They trained his mind to recognize a face, link it to threat, and erase all moral hesitation in the moment. There was only one face in the loop that matched a living person. Kenneth Kent. Jaime stared out the window. I know how it ends, he said. I get close. I see him. I forget everything else. No, Arya said. This time, you remember. She pulled out the sightglass list and the copied field notes. One paragraph stood out. Subject J13. Displays high receptivity to symbolic interference. Possible countermeasure, mnemonic anchor. What's a mnemonic anchor? She asked. Grant looked over. It's a way to tether someone to memory. A sound, a phrase, a symbol. Something real they trust. She turned to Jaime. What would anchor you? He didn't answer. She reached into her bag and pulled out something she hadn't touched in years. A cassette tape. The last voicemail David Holden had left before he vanished. Jaime had never heard it. She played it. His grandfather's voice was warm, scratchy. Hey, buddy. Just checking in. We're heading out soon. Road trip time, remember? Don't forget your flashlight. I know you always forget it, but not this time, yeah? You're gonna love the sky where we're going. It's different. It makes you feel small, but not in a bad way. Just right-sized. Be brave, Jaime. You've always been braver than you think. Jaime closed his eyes. His fingers unclenched. That's it, he whispered. That's the anchor. Arya pressed stop. Then softly, we'll play it before you see him. And if the sequence starts, we break it. Grant pulled off the highway and turned onto a dirt road heading toward the base of a distant ridge. Fort Vesper lay buried beneath it, still sealed, still holding the man who knew too much and remembered too little. As they approached, a single drone flew overhead. A red dot blinked on their dash. They know we're coming, Grant said. Arya stared into the desert heat, unmoved. Good, she said. Let them watch. They arrived at Fort Vesper just before dusk. The sun cast long gold shadows across the ridge, and the heat shimmered like a veil hiding the entrance. It looked the same as before, quiet, still, buried in dust. But Arya knew better. The base was awake now, watching. Jaime sat in the back seat, hood pulled low, eyes closed. Arya had played the voicemail from his grandfather 3 times on the drive. He hadn't spoken, just listened. Breathing steadily, hands clasped in his lap. Grant parked behind a fallen bluff and killed the engine. We walk from here, no headlights. They moved fast and quiet, retracing their steps through the breach in the perimeter fence. The wind had shifted, carrying the smell of rain. Somewhere behind them, thunder echoed over the horizon, a storm building just out of reach. As they reached the concrete hatch, Jaime paused. I remember this place. You were brought here, Arya said gently, before they moved you. No, Jaime whispered. After. They brought me back. Grant keyed the entry panel. The lights were dimmer now, the hum fainter, but the keypad still flickered to life. He typed the override code Beckett had given them. The door hissed open. Inside, everything was different. The corridor no longer echoed. The red emergency strips had been replaced with full overhead lighting. The broken monitors were gone. In their place, surveillance cameras, small, sleek, rotating. They cleaned it up, Grant said. They're expecting us. They descended in silence. Arya held Jaime's arm. He didn't resist, but his body was tense, like every step triggered a memory he didn't trust. When they reached sub-level 3, the chamber where Arya had found her father, they stopped. The door was already open. The room inside was lit by a soft, clinical glow. Kenneth Kent sat in the same chair, unrestrained now, but still wired to monitors. His eyes were open, clear, no longer vacant. He looked directly at Arya as she stepped in. I told you they'd come, he said. Then his eyes shifted and locked on Jaime. For a moment, nothing moved. Jaime took one step forward. Kenneth didn't flinch. Do you remember me? He asked softly. Jaime blinked. You were in the sequence. I know. They used me as a trigger. I'm sorry. Jaime's breathing grew shallow. Arya reached into her bag and played the voicemail. David Holden's voice filled the room again. Jaime's hands unclenched. He didn't move toward Kenneth. He didn't attack. He just breathed. The moment passed. Then Kenneth looked up. They've already started Phase 4. Arya's blood ran cold. What is Phase 4? Kenneth leaned back, eyes sharp now, aware. Distribution. They've developed a civilian-facing application, audio-visual loops embedded in consumer media. Streaming platforms, social campaigns, every device that watches you, teaches you. How widespread? Grant asked. They launched the pilot 2 weeks ago, citywide in Seattle, then Los Angeles, then overseas. Why? Jaime asked, voice rough. Because fear is the easiest delivery system, Kenneth said. Fear programs faster than logic. That's what they learned from Sightglass. Trauma doesn't just erase, it rewrites. Arya felt the ground shift under her. What do they want people to become? Kenneth didn't answer. Jaime turned to him, jaw clenched. Why me? Why did they pick me? Kenneth looked directly at him. Because you resisted. Jaime blinked. You weren't supposed to survive the programming, but you did. You retained fragments. You built memory around pain instead of through it. That made you dangerous and valuable. Jaime shook his head. I'm not a system, he said. I'm not a weapon. No, Kenneth said quietly. You're the cure. A sound echoed down the corridor. Boots. 4 of them. Guards in unmarked tactical gear moved in fast, but they didn't raise weapons. They surrounded the room and stood silent, waiting. Then a voice came through the intercom. Cold, familiar. Beckett. You shouldn't have come back, she said. Arya stepped forward. You lied. You said you left. I did, but they pulled me back in when they learned Jaime survived. He's the only one who ever broke the loop. We need to understand how. The new phase depends on it. You're programming the public. We're adapting the public. The world is burning. Fear needs form, structure. Sightglass is evolution. Arya shouted into the air. It's control. No, Beckett said. It's protection. If we don't steer the mind, someone else will. Arya grabbed the drive from her bag. The list, the logs, the footage. I'm leaking it. Every name, every test, every truth. Beckett's voice turned to ice. Do that and we release the failsafe. What failsafe? The embedded trigger in subject J13. It was never erased, just buried. If he goes public, if you release the list, he activates. And this time, there's no anchor strong enough. The room fell silent. Then Kenneth spoke. There is one. They all turned. What? Arya asked. I recorded a counter sequence, he said. Years ago. Just in case. It's not in their system. I hid it in the personal archive of the last external analyst. Who? He looked at Arya. You. She froze. I don't. Season 1. That encrypted drive you recovered from Arizona. The one you never opened. Arya stared at him. Then slowly, she remembered. The drive had been too corrupted to open. She'd archived it, then forgotten it during a hard drive crash. It was still at home, in the bottom drawer of a locked case she hadn't touched in years. You're saying the antidote is in my past? Yes, you just never knew what it was. The guards didn't move. Beckett's voice returned. Quieter now. Calculating. Then we'll come for it. Arya stepped closer to the mic. No, she said. We're already gone. Grant lobbed a flash charge from his bag. The room filled with smoke and light. They moved fast. Arya grabbed Jaime's hand. Grant led them out. Behind them, Kenneth stayed seated. They'll come for you, Arya said. They already did, he replied. Now go. They drove through the night. Jaime slept in the back seat, twitching, whispering the same words over and over. I am not what they made me. Arya stared out the window. Her father was alive. The program wasn't over. And everything she'd uncovered had been leading to the one file she never thought mattered. The cabin smelled of dust, old files, and the last storm that had passed through the valley 3 years earlier. Arya hadn't stepped foot here since season 2. She never thought she'd be back. She unlocked the desk drawer and retrieved the storage case. A black, fingerprint-locked Pelican shell labeled Archive 1:redacted media. Inside was the forgotten hard drive. It looked ordinary, like any other rescue from a junk data dump. But her father had told her it held the only counter sequence, the only cure. Jaime sat on the couch behind her, silent, pale. He hadn't slept in 2 days. The strain of remembering and resisting was showing in his body. Every now and then, he winced like something inside his mind had started to come loose. Grant watched from the window, scanning the horizon. No drones, no signals. Yet, They had time, but not much. Arya plugged the drive into her laptop. The system stuttered, paused, and then loaded. Route unknown, Recavive, Acre 001. File size, 1.3 gigabytes. Format, .mp4. Created, 2004.047. Description, unlisted, undeclared, auth, K. Kent. She opened the video. The screen showed her father, years younger, uniform wrinkled, eyes sharp but tired. He sat in a plain room. No insignias, just a desk and a mic. This message is for subject J13. Jaime, if you're watching this, it means you survived. It means the sequence didn't erase all of you. That means you're stronger than they ever planned. He leaned forward. You were a child. And we failed you. I failed you. But memory isn't just a weapon. It's a rebellion. If you remember, they lose. The screen flickered. Then came the sequence. But it wasn't colors, not spirals, not control. It was Jaime's life. Clips, photos, reconstructed memories. Him with Holden at a lake. Jaime laughing at a roadside diner. Running through a field. A telescope aimed at the sky. Then Holden's voice. Over soft guitar strings. You're not broken, Jaime. You're human. That's all they couldn't control. Jaime's eyes flooded with tears. He stood. I remember this, he whispered. That day, that field, Arya closed the laptop. That's the anchor now. He nodded. She turned to Grant. We upload this, we overwrite the trigger. If the program still runs through Jaime, this will disable it. And the rest of the files? Grant asked. The list, the logs, the experiments, the names of the dead. Arya looked at her podcast studio. Dusty, forgotten. But the mic still worked. The RSS feed still pinged hundreds of thousands of listeners. She sat, and she spoke. This is Arya Kent. You haven't heard from me in a while. That's not because I stopped looking. It's because I found something that scared me into silence. You've heard of Project Sightglass. You've heard the theories, the conspiracies, the jokes. But this is not a theory. This is a memory built in others to control you. I'm releasing a file today, a file with names, footage, and a message. A message meant for one boy, Jaime Holden. He survived what they did, and now he's remembering, and if he can, so can we. She hit publish. It went live instantly, pushed to every subscriber, fed to the archive, shared on backup servers around the world. 1,000 mirrors, 1,000 points of light. Grant turned from the window. They're coming. 2 black SUVs crested the ridge. Jaime looked to Arya. I'm ready. They ran. Out the back, through the trees. 3 days later, the story broke globally. Anonymous files leaked across forums, private servers, and encrypted whistleblower sites. The Sightglass dossier became the most downloaded file on the dark net in under 24 hours. Reddit threads exploded. Journalists began investigating the names on the list. Several retired officers went into hiding. But Jaime, gone, vanished, no sightings. Arya released no further episodes, just one final message. Some people ask if I regret it. Letting it out, letting the world know. But the truth doesn't care about regret, it just waits. And now, the waiting's over. 6 months later. The desert was green again. Spring had arrived early in the highlands east of Marfa, coaxing wildflowers from the dust and painting the ridges with color Arya barely remembered. She stood alone near the place where David Holden and Jaime had vanished 3 years before. The air was still. The wind held its breath. She held the recorder in her hand, thumb poised over the button. The same model she'd used since season 1. Scratched, faded, reliable. She didn't press record. There were no new episodes? Not anymore. Her voice had gone as far as it could. The world had taken what it wanted from the truth, and the rest it buried again, the way it always does. A few arrests, a few closed-door hearings. Then silence. Sanitized history. But the memory had spread. Across forums, in classrooms, in whispers, in the way people looked at their screens a little longer, in the way certain phrases became warnings instead of slogans, in the way someone, somewhere, would always ask, "Have you heard about Project Sightglass?" That was enough. From her bag, Arya pulled a sealed envelope. Inside, a drive. The full version. Unedited. Footage, reports, names never released. She placed it under a rock near the base of the Joshua tree, the one with 2 trunks. Then she walked away. Not for fear, but because she'd already said everything she needed to say. Behind her, the wind rose, scattering dust across the ridge. And somewhere far away, in a city she'd never visit again, a boy with too many memories and a name the world forgot walked through a crowded street unnoticed, not hiding, just watching.